Welcome to The Creator's Soul, a podcast mini-series about the creative process and its application in every area of your life. I'm your co-host, Elizabeth, a creative producer and director based in New York City. For over a decade, I've brought concepts into reality through collaborations with Penguin Random House, the Vans Warped Tour, Tribeca Film Festival, Concord Music, Viacom, and Google, to name a few. I've also had the pleasure to work alongside indie filmmakers and regional and off-Broadway theater artists to tell stories in both live and recorded mediums. I'm joined by our co-host.
Hi, I'm HeyJune, an energy and leadership coach with a background in Wall Street and New York City tech startup. While I was at my grueling corporate job, I stumbled across a deck of tarot cards and discovered the world of storytelling and intuitive readings. When my screenplays started getting traction from places like the Austin Film Festival, I thought I would go into screenwriting, but the universe had a totally different plan, and Pheydrus blew up with coverage from places like Forbes, CNN, and Fox Business. So instead of accepting the corporate promotion that I have been wanting for years, I declined and went full-time with Pheydrus, where I could make a greater impact by helping people become better leaders in their own lives through their inner wisdom and creativity.
We're inviting you to join us in discovering your potential and how to realize that in tangible ways in your work and relationships. Learn how to find the joy and do the work of leveling up with us. Throughout the next 6 episodes, we're going to explore a different facet of the creation process and its applications. Today, we're talking about the podcast's conception and what to expect over the next few episodes. Let's jump in. The newsletters that you were sending out really caught my attention. The one in particular about how consistency builds trust, because that's something that I've been really connecting with as a theme, I'd say, in the last year in particular. I reached out to you and I said, hey, I want to talk more about this. Do you want to make a podcast or something where we're able to talk more and unpack these topics of how we work, why we work the way we do, and how that impacts the creative process and the relationships that we have that really impact the creative process. And you were so receptive to it. And so it's great to finally be recording this with you.
Yeah, so there is a shorthand. I always tell people there's a shorthand between mystics and storytellers. And storytellers they're filmmakers, writers, directors, producers, poets, and all of that. So I feel the same way between you and me. I feel like we have a shorthand. And obviously I was trying to break into film for so long, and I had my own film journey. And that people that follow me know this, but the way Pheydrus started was its own crazy, synchronous event. But I still leverage and pull in a lot of the elements that I had learned from my film days, from my screenwriting days. And so much of tarot is storytelling. And you heal and you find meaning through storytelling, right? So that's where a lot of mystics and people in the film world really overlap. So I think that's why themes such as consistency probably stood out to you, because it's never easy to bring anything into reality when you're to go from script to screen. It's a crazy process and you've got to be consistent. I think that there's a lot that the audience can really learn from the creative process, to your point, even the unsexy parts like consistency, because that's not sexy at all. But really quickly, can you share what exactly what you do now? What is sort of your creative medium of the moment?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I work as a producer, creative producing in particular. My company, Potter Productions, focuses around creativity as a service. So we express that in a variety of ways through video, and that could be something like brand content marketing, video series, film. We work a lot with indie filmmakers to create and develop their content, get it in front of their intended audience. And we also do events and multimedia work, which encompasses a lot of visual creativity, broadcast, live streaming, things like that, as well as cultivating space. So understanding what you're trying to accomplish with an event in a physical space. How can you create environments that are engaging for your guests? And then a part of that too is really building out the creative relationships with our collaborators. So a big focus for me over the last couple years has been to really define what it means to be a producer and what it means to be a business owner, because that role can take on so many different facets. And I think for me, there's been an element of defining, what am I trying to accomplish? Do I just want to make a bunch of money? Do I want to have like really big successful titles? What does that mean? And I kept coming back to the ethos of holding space and connecting. So a big part of what I've been doing is finding those collaborators and connecting them on projects to really energize that creative process and make content that connects with their audience and helps everyone involved to continue to grow. It's not only like what we're doing, but how we're doing it. And that's part of the reason I reached out to you again, was just that I think there's this need. We're at this pivotal point in society where I think we had mentioned the giant chaos when we were talking about the structure and format of this podcast. And I really feel that. I feel like we're in this giant chaos as a society, and we're all like trying to find our way after a couple years of this pandemic and other major historic happenings. And I really want to be a part of helping our communication styles and our social circles develop in a way that's super restorative and regenerative and helping us usher in this new era of our humanity and our societies.
Yeah, so that's fascinating you bring that up, because I definitely feel like the pandemic or the world shutting down in general has made people question why they do what they do on a deeper level. Pre-pandemic, I feel like there was this notion around the world that artists are just streamers. It's like an indulgent thing to pursue. But now that we're all in this, now that the entire world is in a chaotic mode and kind of, I feel like things are really being torn down to be built back up in a new way. So that creative skill has never been more necessary. Even if you're not an artist, like in your day-to-day life, it's been so much more important to harness that skill as a leader, for example. Like, how do you motivate people when they don't, not that they don't want to work, but the working circumstance and the environment has changed so much. How do you convey that dream, that vision when things are so hard now to pull together or to execute on or to be motivated, especially after months of lockdown? It's almost like, it sounds to me like you went from just creative production mode to, okay, like how do I share this skill more broadly with people so they can like leverage it and utilize it in their own lives, which is super powerful.
Yeah. I think what I was seeing was this potential to take the creative process and apply that to every aspect of your life. Relationships are in a way a creative process. How you go about your day is a creative process. There's a lot of creativity to be had there if you allow it. I think creativity feels like this kind of dreamy, mushy term. Like you said, creatives are just dreamers. But I think what I'm referencing there is the innovation, the presence with the process of taking something from an idea to a final product. I think it's an ability to problem solve and use hurdles in a way that is restorative and not just plowing through it or like burning bridges. There is an element of creation and cultivation that happens when you're applying creativity in every aspect of your life. And like you said, it can be like very cut and dry circumstances, but those same principles apply. And I think there's something super generative and gracious in looking at every aspect of your life in a creative way.
Yeah, and that really bleeds into spirituality and spiritual practices. A lot of, like, for example, like Artist Way by Julia Cameron, she talks about how her journaling process is very meditative. It's like she's connected to source, and that's where she gets her best ideas from. And I think that's something that people need reminders. Everyone has that ability to connect to something higher than themselves, to be creative, to figure out a way to be, to your point, like problem solving in their lives and not just quit or give up. So I think us coming together is going to be really powerful and useful as far as unpacking what our processes are.
I wanted to go back to your story. You had also come from a background of corporate structure and exploring how to create in those kinds of spaces. So I feel like it's also important that you share how you got into the position and role that you're doing now, how you've ended up doing what you were doing with tarot and really looking at spiritual practices as a way to manifest these things in your life, whether that's work in the work that you're doing or in relationships. I think that's, at least in my perspective, like spirituality is something that's really misunderstood. It's almost
Totally.
like how people think of intuition and creating. Like they think, oh, it's going to appear for me someday. But I feel like spirituality is one of those things too, where it's like everyone has their preconceived perception of it and experience with it. So how did you get into crafting your storytelling around that?
Yeah, it was definitely an unfolding. It was not overnight. It took 10 years and it's still ongoing. I started my career in Wall Street and then moved into tech. But the whole time I was in screenwriting and filmmaking um and the tarot actually came in as a tool for me to develop better characters because I was like, I need to figure out how to, because I had a really difficult time trying to come up with characters outside of the archetypes that I know. Tarot, I just stumbled upon it and I figured there were like court cards, which are people cards, and king, queen, knight. So that's how I started with it. And initially, I'm not gonna lie, like it was a little bit like divination, right? Oh wait, like I pulled this card and it just happened to come true. What the hell? Am I actually psychic? Like it was. I think everybody initially comes across that version of quote unquote spirituality, like the ooh, like maybe there is something here. Like maybe I'm actually like a fortune teller. I can predict something or whatever. And then I start to realize there is a weird chasm that you cross when you do this enough where you recognize, wait, did I predict that or did I create that? Was it like a self-fulfilling prophecy because I like pulled a card and now it's like inside my head. So now I'm like consciously taking actions and speaking the words to manifest it. So then that like put me through a totally different rabbit hole of like, you know, like epigenetics, neuroscience, quantum physics, and the role they play in spirituality. Long story short, there was a huge transition between predicting into creating. Tarot was a great tool for me to explore my subconscious world because two people can pull the same card and interpret it totally differently. Just like how two people can watch the same movie and interpret it totally differently. So it's like, why is that? You know, what's going on inside your brain that's making you interpret a certain way, which then results in certain set of choices that you make as a result of whatever your brain is saying, which then manifests a totally different reality compared to your neighbor. And they work on such a subtle level. So tarot was a great gateway drug, so to speak, into exploring my subconscious. And now it's gotten to a point where I'm like, okay, I know what my subconscious is and what it's telling me. How can I rewire that? How can I reprogram that? Which then forces you to question, like, okay, what do I want my life to look like then? What do I want my relationships to look like? Because I can reprogram my stuff all I want, but if I don't know the vision, the ultimate vision that I want for my life, then what's the point of reprogramming? I'm basically reprogramming it to whatever or what everyone else is saying it should be, right?
Mm,
So it went
yeah.
from predicting to reflection to conscious creation, which then forces you to examine, okay, shit, I am responsible for my own life.
Yeah. It's one of those things that I find to be the most invigorating about being alive is that potential to take an idea or a concept or a vision and turn that into a reality. And to get to share that with people is even like another layer of that to me.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the reasons why we are going to be structuring these episodes around individual applications and stories, and then how those stages of the creation process also manifest in groups, because
Yeah.
it can look it's impacted by the individual and the groups, but it's definitely a different way of being expressed in an individual versus a group.
Not only in our individual work, but in our own lives, because we both have pivoted our careers multiple times and the same skill sets were applied to pivot. And I think it's really important to share that process with a broader audience who are lost and trying to figure out like, okay, where do I go from here? I can tell you right now, there is a huge overlap between like ancient wisdom, spiritual tools. There is something to be said about the creation theory that the Bible talks about that overlaps hugely with the first several major arcana cards in tarot. Like people underestimate like how much of these patterns and clues and stories overlap modern project management processes. They're not very different. There are some ancient laws that apply to all of us. Even when you and I were talking, where I was like, wow, yeah, like that stuff that Elizabeth is doing, like I can totally relate to that because I use that process too in my own life, right? But like from like a mystical standpoint, not as like a producer. So I feel like it'd be really powerful to kind of break it out into different phases, what actual steps we take to bring our creative ideas into reality and hopefully give people the framework to apply that in their own lives. To your point, whether it's relationships or business or parenting.
Oh my God, parenting. I say this only half joking, but any creative thing that you're trying to make is like becoming parents with that core creative team. I really coach creatives when they're coming together, and even like in a creative collaboration, to say, okay, like really define expectations, define boundaries, understand that you're going to be exhausted together sometimes. And maybe that's not the time to have that serious conversation, just like parents, or people who are like invested in something together, where you're under a lot of stress, you are juggling multiple things in your life. You're going to have those moments together, and it really creates a very special type of relationship, whether your creative process is yielding a child, like an actual human being in the world, or a creative product like a film or a story or an event. There's quite a bit of overlap, I think, in terms of parenting styles and relationships and those creative outcomes.
I definitely want to pick your brain on that because I feel very strongly about the correlation between leadership and creativity. Like you can be a total tyrant and be like, this is my vision, you guys go do it. End of story.
Yeah.
No room for negotiation. Or you can literally like co-create in a way that works for everybody. Right?
Yeah.
Because everybody has their own connection to the divine and the source or whatever.
And I think what you had said too about how you use the tools you have. So science, spiritual rituals and practices, project management, societal structures, relationships, all of those are, I guess, tools in your toolbox to then discover for yourself what is going to be your reality that you're creating.
But I think the onus is also on the audience to digest it for themselves and to make it their own, because we're giving a framework, but at the end of the day, you have to apply it in a way that you can handle in your own life.
Yeah.
For example, the consistency, like you and I can talk about it all we want, but we know how hard it is. So people also have to realize, okay, like baby steps, like what does consistency look like for today? Like as far as what I can handle. And maybe someone's listening to the podcast and they're like, okay, I understand that we can like all co-create as a group, but the reality is I hate my boss or like I hate my teammates. What do I do? Right. So I think it's important to acknowledge like it's messy. This whole process is messy because humans are messy, and it's all about navigating through it without losing sight of the vision that you have.
Yes. And I'm really excited to unpack that whole process with you and really dive into the ways that the creative process can be utilized and harnessed to identify where you are in your life, take those next steps, and really see growth and meaning take shape for you. I think that's one of the things that HeyJune and I have talked about quite a bit, was this honesty in the process and being able to be real with yourself and with others as you're exploring. So I hope you all stay tuned and feel as excited as we do to take on these next couple episodes.
Yay. I'm excited. Super excited, actually.
Yay.
Yeah. So just expect each episode to be released weekly. So stay tuned for that. And I look forward to ongoing conversations with you, Elizabeth.
Thanks for tuning in to Creator Soul, a podcast miniseries presented by Pheydrus and Potter Productions. We hope you join us for the rest of the series and discover something that will help you meet your fullest creative potential.